So how much time do I? Tell you what, my name is Doug Spindler. I'm one of the organizers. How's the conference going so far? Yeah. I take the compliments. There's another guy downstairs to take the complaints. Okay, is that fair? So I take all the glory. Any questions about the conference? We have 2 minutes while people are still walking in. Anything we could do better for next year? Oh, I take that as a compliment. Holy smoke. What? More space, yeah. You know, that's easy to fix. Pay more. Free beer. Yeah, okay.
We'll open up the roof next year.
Yeah, rooftop gardens, beer garden. So I got a question. Let me kind of just throw this out here. I teach part-time at San Francisco, or Community College San Francisco, CCSF. CCSF has a campus downtown that's about a 5-8 minute walk. It's in Chinatown if you're local from the Moscone Center. So the question I have is, would you like to have it there, but the trade-off is we can't have alcohol? But the space would be free and we could have more sessions and more room. You cannot bring it in because this is our education system and we don't want to pollute students with alcohol. No. That's a big no. So what I'm hearing from you is alcohol is more important than space. Space, well, you know, this is a trade-off that we have to think about. So, you know, do you have comedy night? Maybe. Okay. Right now. All right. So my response is, yes, there is. There's, I think, a Hyatt or there's some hotels. Come on, this is downtown San Francisco. There are lots of bars, and I'm sure we could get a sponsor. And I believe the restriction is you cannot consume alcohol on premises, but that doesn't mean that you can't have consumed alcohol off premises and come on premises. In other words, we have no drug testing for students yet. All right. So let me introduce, I think we're time, right? Is this close enough? Okay. So Alex Pinto, very good so far. Chief Data Security Scientist of NIDL, which is like a needle. So I'm assuming, are you trying to find a needle in a haystack?
Funny you should say that. It actually was a very clever pun you just did.
I tell you what, I would like to see your presentation. Please take over.
Thank you so much. This was Doug, everyone. Hello. How are we doing? Is this good? I'll try not to move a lot. Okay. Hello. Okay, how about now? Okay? All right, let's get this show on the road. So, my name is Alex Pinto, Chief Data Scientist of NIDL, and like Doug very well presented. I've also been doing a lot of research under MLSec project, right? And this is sharing is caring, right? And this is in a way, the ending of maybe a 2 years long story of research and presentations that I have been doing on the overall quality of threat intelligence indicators and what we can do about it to make it a little less sucky and actually be able to use them for stuff, right? To some definition of stuff really depends on what your org wants to do. So I'm going to take you guys through a journey, right? This is a long presentation. I'll do my best not to overshoot my time. I think now that I know that it's long, it's going to be a little bit better. And please enjoy. And if it's the first time you're watching a presentation from me, I apologize in advance. And anybody on the Twitters, right? We have a hashtag. It's DDTI, and that stands for Data-Driven Threat Intelligence. It's not anything you will find in Urban Dictionary or anything like that. This is completely safe for work. Doesn't mean it can't be now, right? Guys just have to be creative. But probably, yes. So anyway, let's get the show on the road. So anyway, this talk is specifically about threat intelligence sharing, right? And it's really what I've been I was going to say wasting, but that would be unfair. I have been spending my time analyzing and trying to find interesting metrics and things that would work, right, when we're thinking about threat intelligence sharing, because it's all the rage, right? It's something that's very, very popular right now. But first, I have to take you to a very teeny tiny journey through what I have talked before about threat intelligence, so then you guys can be in the right context, right? Because like most of my presentations, this is a work of spite, right? I make a point, right? And then somebody, you know what? You're actually wrong because of this. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay, here's a year of my life trying to prove that actually you're the one who's wrong, sir. I mean, like anything on the internet. So it's important to take you through the story. And it's important for you to get the context of what I'm trying to explore and why should we care? Why this is important for all of us. So one important point is that this is a data-driven talk, right? Of course, there will be a lot of opinions, right? But these are opinions that came from data that I've actually gathered from several different threat intelligence providers, several different threat intelligence sharing platforms, and things like that, right? So the idea is here, and like most of these things, when you actually look at the data, you get this, maybe your understanding or your gut feeling is validated, right? But it's always important for us to try to look at the data, and the data will help us be better. The data will help you understand how we can improve in all those different things. Anyway, what's the story here? What have we done before? So a year or so ago, maybe 2 years now, time gets really funny around Silicon Valley. I was working around trying to find metrics on threat intelligence indicators. So everybody has a threat feed. You can you can get a bunch of threat feeds on the internet. How do you find which ones are good, which ones are bad? Which ones are maybe more attuned to whatever you need to defend, or maybe, oh, this one is just replaying that one, right? So you actually shouldn't have them both. So all sorts of different things, like, because, I mean, everybody was fighting for, oh, I have the more indicators than everyone, and nobody really cared because people maybe were just making up IP addresses. I mean, they had, like, distributed systems of honey, dark nets everywhere, you know, I mean, lots of IP addresses. So the point is, let's have a look at it. Let's analyze this, right? So there are two open source projects that the MLSec project put forward. One is called Combine, which needs a lot of love. It has been like left on the wayside for a while, but I've actually found someone who's willing to help me save it, right? Hey, he's over there. He's over here somewhere. But anyway, it's really a Python collection of Python scripts that will get open source intelligence. I mean, threat intelligence feeds that are open, you find in lists, you find in different websites, and put them in a format, a CSV you can input anywhere. I mean, send it to crits, send it to some other, no threat node integration though, hopefully soon. I have my friend Scott over there in the back, he's going to develop it for me, I'm sure. But anyway, you get the feeds. And then you use a TIQ test, which was the real star of the show, right? Which was doing statistical analysis and all sorts of different tests to see, oh, does this threat intelligence feed updates itself? Do people clean it up, right? All sorts of different questions. You think, like, you assume that if you're buying something, right, the people would take care of the feeds. But you know what? Sometimes you should just look, right? So anyway, there was a bunch of tests, right? I'm not going to go through the whole story. I just want you guys to know that there was an overlap test and there was a uniqueness test. And they're actually my cousins, right? The idea is how much overlap there are between different threat intelligence feeds. So when you see a chart like this, right, this actually means, like, the darker the square is, it actually means there's more overlap between a feed that's on the horizontal and the feed that's on the vertical, right? And it's not symmetric because some feeds are bigger than others, so one big feed can contain the whole of the smaller feed, right? But that obviously doesn't work the other way. It's not really transitive, right? But at least with something like this, you can tell how similar or how different the threat intelligence feeds are. And this was one of the funniest things on my research, right? This is one of the most interesting conclusions. It's the conclusion that from that research I want to share with you guys, which was, you know, I was expecting to be a lot of overlap, and this is specifically about outbound data, right? When I say outbound data, it's like places that are hosting malware, or C2 servers, or your favorite APT, threat-y, nation-state, threat actor infrastructure, right? This is places you go to and they're bad, there's very little overlap. There's a lot of, and this is the flip side, there's a lot of uniqueness. So maybe 95% of the data from those providers, there was no actual intersection, right? And I'm talking about IP addresses, domain names, I'm talking about, I didn't even look at hashes, but if you look into hashes, this number becomes even worse, right? And I think everybody kind of has this sense as well, right? And I was actually surprised when I did this because I was hoping that like all the paid feeds, they would be pretty much more on the same ball, right? They would be tracking the same actors, they would be doing the same work, right? I know very talented people working in all those companies, but no, it's like everybody's searching for the same things and not finding enough, right? And it ties to an interesting statistical conclusion, right? And this is what we were talking about in the DBIR last year, which was the fact there's so little overlap, and it doesn't really matter how many thread feeds you get in, and still the overlap becomes very small. It actually means that probably our surface, right, the number of people that are actually out to get us is so much more larger than we're able to discover, right? Because if you just like, you get a sample of the people who are bad, let's say, and this is what thread feeds are. They are samples, they are examples of things that have been vetted and that have found to be bad, right? And then you just keep getting more samples and more samples, and there's very little overlap. It means that your population is probably very, very, very large, right? And the idea is that, where's the hand up there?
Are we allowed to ask questions now, or should we wait till the end?
Maybe at the end. Are you going to forget it? I mean, I really want questions. Please don't forget it. So the point becomes, when you are, doesn't matter how many feeds you got, doesn't matter how many feeds you buy, that's never a winning strategy. There are diminishing returns. You're never going to get all the intelligence. You're never going to know all the badness, right? You have to learn from it. You have to look, get the data, analyze the data, hunt with the data, do all those things. But just the data doesn't do you that good, right? I'm not saying don't buy them. I'm saying that just don't buy them all and make sure whatever you're buying is good for you, right? And this was the story about the tests. So I ended up with this conclusion, right? So guys, it's not about how many feeds you have, right? It's about what you do with it. What's your threat intelligence program like? How you make it reasonable, right? And you go into all those things like, oh yeah, don't buy a feed before you know what your process is going to look like. Just get the free ones for now and make it work, right? Understand how you would use something like that before you actually commit money to it, right? And I was super happy because, I mean, this was a good conclusion, right? It's kind of stuff you go home and you're like, yeah, I did my job today, right? This was good research. But then the internet happened, right? And I got a lot of constructive feedback. And one of the most interesting feedbacks that I got was that, oh, you're absolutely right about the overlap, about the uniqueness, but you know what? That's what threat intelligence sharing is going to solve. And I'm like, really? I can't see that. So I decided, okay, let me have a look, right? Why not? I mean, knowledgeable people, thought leaders, right, are telling me that this is what threat intelligence sharing is going to solve. So let's do it. I mean, at least I can be a thought follower, right? I can, you know? Yeah, right? So anyway, and I was like, why do people like threat intelligence sharing? What's the allure, right? And then I figured out, actually, it comes to a very simple plan of information security platitudes, right? So point number one, right? Everybody has this argument on threat intelligence that the best threat intelligence is the one that you build, you generate yourself, right? And I call this the artisanal hand-woven indicator theory, right? It's like, yeah, no, this is really good because this is mine. I got the knife and I chipped this for ages. This is perfect, right? And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying there's problems when you think it like that, right? And the second one is the kind of the herd mentality and herd immunity kind of thing. It's like, yeah, if everyone from the industry gets together, everybody's going to be protected, right? And I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about that as well. And then something magic happens in the middle, right? After we took care of all of this, and then we're all secure, right? So the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about the hand-woven stuff is, well, I don't know how many of you guys actually tried to make threat intelligence operational in your organizations. It's super hard. It's super hard because of the volume of data. It's super hard because of the volume of threat intelligence data, of the volume of log data you have to compare it to, or whatever other magical thing you're doing. You're pivoting, you're running multigos, you are... Anyway, all this hunting fun that people do nowadays. The problem is, there's a lot of articles in the industry of pushback on threat intelligence because it's just too hard to use, right? And there was this article from 451 where it was, you know what, it's just only for the 1%. If you're like IC community, if you're like, I just said IC community, it doesn't make any sense. If you're like a big bank, if you have, I have a couple of dozen people to spare to just do threat hunting all the time. Sure, it's perfect for you. But then, if consuming the data is for the 1%, what is the percentage of people that actually are going to generate good indicators that other people are going to be able to use, right? So it becomes the question, right? I'm assuming that whoever generates it has gone through the whole process of actually using them, so he knows at least what's good for him, right? So it becomes a problem, a fundamental problem of who are these people who are sharing, and who are these people going to be, right? So we go to the herd immunity thing, which honestly doesn't make any sense, because the whole point about the herd immunity thing is that maybe you're vaccinated and most of the population is vaccinated. Let's call vaccinated, you got the IOC, right? But, it's just because my bank's office is like beside the other bank's office, doesn't mean that guy is protected, right? Because the internet kind of connects us all, not through like specific space constraints, right? So everybody's touching everybody and touching each other germs all the time on the internet. So that doesn't really work like that. Everybody would have to have all the IOCs all the time. I'm not saying that's impossible, right? And that this is definitely the goal of some people, to be able to speed up the sharing and make sharing more pervasive, right? And I'm an honest believer that this should be the goal. I'm just trying to point out here that this is actually super hard to do. And we're not even close of figuring out what those things mean, right? So it's very easy to go into platitudes and just think that, oh yeah, herd immunities, yay, and verticality, you know, and get lost in the details. Like everything in security, the devil is in the details, 100%. And anyway, the rest of this is not important. So let's handle the, yeah, I have to think about the time, right? So let's talk about the question marks, right? I think the question marks are the really important part, because what are we sharing, right? And here's the thing: if you look at the way threat intelligence sharing communities have been put together, they have existed forever. As long as there has been security, there has been sharing communities, there has been closed mailing lists, there has been forums, right? And this is something that we inherited. I mean, everybody, so there's this whole, threat intelligence, what does threat intelligence even mean? Blah, 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 you should be an intelligence analyst. We inherited this from the intelligence community. And the way their tradecraft, or whatever fancy word you want to use there, is actually around, you have very close trust groups, that people who know each other, people who can vet for each other, right? And then, I'm going to tell you that this bad thing happened, right? So then you can act on it, right? But I'm doing this as a trust thing, right? I know who you are, you know who I am, right? If this gets out, everybody's screwed in the same way. So, I mean, there's a lot of things there, right? But and this is the culture that permeates this to this day. The problem is, now we're trying to move to something that's not analyst-centric, to something it's automation-centric, right? We're trying to push these IOCs as fast as we can, and that's the work that Styx is trying to do, right? And, I mean, you can see whatever you want from Styx. They are trying, right? They are trying to put together a standard. So we stop sending emails and CSV files to each other. And that, I mean, I applaud that. That is amazing. Someone has to step up and create the first version, which was terrible. Now the second version is going to come out. It's going to be a slightly less terrible. And hopefully we'll get to okay, this is almost fine. But we have to start iterating. We have to start doing this. And there's a lot of people, you shouldn't just be sharing IP addresses, sending IP addresses to each other, or domains, or things like that. You should be doing the TTPs, you should be doing the higher quality things. But then these are the same people who they don't have enough analysts to do anything with that, right? It's almost like a job protection thing. Oh, I'm the only one who can understand what's on the mailing list, and it also becomes oh, let's just not do IOC sharing, but then sticks is too complicated. I just want to send an IP address. So nobody has any clue what they want, right? And again, as a human, as a human field of study, this is perfectly normal and fine. But we just have to be aware where we are trying to put our ships, where we're trying to understand, where we're trying to move forward as we do this whole sharing thing. And again, this is the trust piece that I was talking about, and this is also a cornerstone of the thing. On one hand, we get all these things. There was the CISA bill that passed. Everybody should be sharing IOCs with the federal government, right? Everybody should be sharing. Sharing is amazing. But then it's all permeated about the circle of trust mentality, right? And it's very hard to reconcile those two things, right? These are two completely different ways to see the world, right? That somehow have to be reconciled for us to be successful into this, right? And one important thing that people don't realize about trust is the two-way aspect, because not only I want to be able to send something to a group, and I know that everybody on the group are people I trust, so that they will consume the data properly, they will take good care of it, they will not, I don't know, leak my source, whatever you want to call it, they will not tell the threat actor that we're onto them. But on the other hand, that creates liability, right? Because me, as company whatever, company whatever is sharing those IOCs. You know what? You think they got owned by these guys? You know? And there's definitely a legal argument there, and there is a significant barrier as well, as far as legal, as far as being able to put your name into an IOC, and that ties into the whole trust aspect of it. But on the flip side of that, if everybody just shared anonymously, right? If you knew, okay, Alex does a kind of a good job when he does the IOC stuff, so anything he posts, anytime he posts something, I'll have a look, right? But then if it just starts coming as anonymous, I mean, who is this guy? Why am I going to waste my time analyzing what he put there, right? And you know, and is it even worth it? So you're always in the danger of the other guy's threat intelligence team be 3 toddlers on a trench coat. You never know, right? Especially if it's anonymous, right? And there is, on the trust aspect, there is a reputation thing. So anyway, enough about the ranting. This was me. This was literally me like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But you got to think about this, you got to think about that, you got to think about this, you got to think about that. And I'm like, okay, given this, let's try to look into the sharing communities and see if there's something we can learn, right? And I'm really, again, this is all constructive, right? This is like, maybe if we understand that we have those limitations, and limitations are the most important thing in any engineering endeavor that you do, right? You have to understand where the limits are, and then you can start to measure against those limits, and maybe you can find, this is how far as we can go with this model, right? And then you can maybe think of a different model. But if you just like wishy-hopey that things are going to be great, we're not helping anyone. So let's bite. So I got a couple of friends to play. You probably heard of Threat Connect, and you've probably heard, especially here on the Bay Area, you probably heard of the work that Facebook is doing on Threat Exchange. It's super cool. It's very API-ish. So if you don't have a lot of developers, you might struggle a little bit to get started with them, but they're doing good work for sure. And some other folks didn't want to be identified. That's perfectly fine. We love you, right? But we love these guys most because, you know, they like me because, yeah, you can talk about us. I know you're not going to say anything too bad if they only knew. But anyway, and especially Facebook, I find it funny because everybody was like so outraged when Facebook started the threat exchange thing. Oh my God, I'm going to send my data to Facebook, and Facebook is the devil. Guys, sharing communities are social networks, right? And maybe this is the thing that we are not making the link in our heads, right? the more you understand that the sharing community and the incentives of sharing communities maybe are more aligned with your Facebook feed and your Twitter feed than you think, right? There may be some things we can learn from this in order to make the sharing experience across the board better and people get more engaged. You want engagement, right? And I sound like this keynote marketing person right now, and I apologize for that, but the secret is people have to use the system. The more people use the system, the more people will use the system. It's as simple as that. So let's start with the indicators themselves, right? So some of these sharing communities, I was actually a part of them, so I could look at the IOCs. Some of them were like, no, you have to be the stall ride, or you have to pay this amount of money. And I'm like, not today. So they just send me like aggregated data. So the ones I could see, right? I had a look, I used those tests that I showed you before so that we can try to understand, try to at least get a taste, right? An idea of the quality of the data. So the overlap was amazing, actually. Right? And this is comparing against all those open feeds that I was telling you about. A couple of private feeds, right, that unfortunately you will have to torture me for me to tell you who they are. And one of the, this was not an invitation, by the way. And one sharing community of those, right? And you see that the actual overlap of the data that was in the sharing community against the private feeds and against the rest of them was actually pretty low. Right? So if I was a part of the sharing community, regardless if I was having paid feeds or not, I was getting value out of it. I mean, at least I wasn't just getting repeat IOCs or things that, oh, everybody knows about this. At least people who are monitoring whatever, all those open feeds and things like that, right? Which was pretty much the experiment on the other presentation, right? And the uniqueness also, I mean, it's the flip side. It stayed pretty high, 92%. It reduced dramatically from the other one. The one was like 98 because I added the private feeds on this. The private feeds have an impact, but I've never seen it go down 90. So, I mean, like I said, it's not just, okay, I'm going to join all sharing communities, now my problem is solved. That's not it. But as far as if you're making this portfolio, so to speak, of threat intelligence feeds, and you're trying to figure out how many is enough, you know what? To me, it looks like if you are in a good sharing community, it's pretty much as good as a paid feed, right? It makes absolutely no difference, right? The important thing is that the sharing communities, they do not want you to use them as a feed. They want you to contribute back. That's the whole point of the sharing part, right? So, personally, I think you have to start somewhere, right? And it's just by seeing the activity, right? You can, let me move away from this. By seeing the activity, it's very distracting. By moving away from the activity, to getting there and being a part of it, you might feel motivated and you might feel enabled to share. As you see other examples, you see other people doing it. So, based on all of that, based on the trust issues I was telling you about, and not my trust issues, the community's trust issues, okay? And I tried to put together some metrics. The metrics I think would be important, in addition to the whole TIQ test stuff, when you're trying to think about sharing communities, right? So that's activity, diversity, feedback, and trust, right? So let's see what they look like. So the point of the activity metric is there anyone in there? Is this on, right? Are people actually sharing, right? And very soon, and this was meant to be super simple. It's like, okay, how many indicators are shared per day, right? And pretty soon you start to see the whole trust scenario showing up, right? Because when you look at the smaller group, the average numbers of IOCs that are being shared every day is at least, well, in the mean thing, it's more than half. It's more than double, actually. But across every single day as well, right? I find super interesting the spike on the large sharing community there. What this probably means is that people were sharing this privately, right? And then suddenly it became public. Somebody leaked, or it was, oh, the APT 20,000 million dropped. And then we got, oh my God, everybody's got to publish the IOC. Because have you guys ever realized someone publishes a report, everyone else is like, yeah, we were tracking these guys too. Yeah, we were. So this is pretty much what happened there. this is pretty much what happened there. So it probably became public, right? And so there's a huge dump of data. So less data, more delays, more data, timely. So again, it talks back to this whole circle of trust thing. I mean, we are not worthy at all, right? There's this dark rooms where these things are going on, right? And you can see that on the activity, right? So across the board, this is only one example, right? But across the board, you could find a relationship as the smaller the group, right? And you'd see there was a tighter ratio of sharing per member or things like that, right? So they don't want to lose control. You don't want to lose control of who's watching this, right? It might be sensitive. It might, especially if you're in the middle of an investigation. And I'm not telling people who are in the middle of an investigation to share their data. There's a lot of very important considerations with law enforcement and all those things when you're doing this. But even if you're not, even if it's just commodity stuff or it's stuff that you see in your network, people are still they hold their cards very tight to their chest, right? So let's talk about diversity, right? And this actually talks back to what I was telling you about around the 1% kind of thing, right? And diversity was very interesting to me because I figured out, at least on the sampling of the communities that I had, and some of them they didn't want to share the data, but they were okay to doing an interview and me talking to them. So across the board, it's like 10%. Doesn't matter how many people you have in your community. Only 10% will share, right? And several reasons. Maybe they're really ahead of the pack, right? And usually what this boils down to is that there's actually a couple of people on the team who are very vocal. They are very like, oh yeah, no, we should be doing this for the betterment of mankind or something like that. And I'm trying to be non-ironic here. They really want to contribute back. They really want to help back, right? And so they help push the org to be in a position where this kind of sharing works. So, and here's the thing, and it's funny because I was talking to people like, isn't this too low, right? Shouldn't we have more people in sharing? And I had more than once people tell me, you know what? I think if it was more people, I wouldn't consume because it's probably going to be crap data. It's funny how it's inside people's heads, right? That the scarcity is related to quality, right? And again, this becomes a very elitist kind of exercise. Only the very few have this capability to share, and we can only share this proud few, right, who are doing this thing. So, I mean, the chart on the left is the actual numbers. Like you can see, drops like dramatically. So I don't know if Michael is on the audience. I have not checked if this is a power law. So leave me alone, right? You do power law, I do this, okay? And this is the log thing. You see, it's bad, right? The guy who shares the most, he really shares the most, right? So again, this is not terrible. If you think back to the whole social network thing, this is distribution of Twitter follower, number of accounts by number of Twitter followers, right? And there is a correlation how much you tweet to how much followers you have, right? And for some people, it's actually a negative correlation because people see you're super dumb and just unfollow you. But it's usually a positive correlation, right? So, but you see, it's the same power law-ish kind of thing. It's the same explanation kind of thing. Some people are more naturally nodes. They're more naturally connectors. They're more naturally talkers, right? And I don't know, it gets them off. They like it, right? Maybe they think they're helping. Maybe they think that they just want the recognition, right? So it's normal. It's relatively normal, in fact, as a human thing. So, and this is where it gets dicey. I was like, okay, everybody's sharing, but what is this data, right? Somebody's looking at it, right? I mean, is the data any good, right? And here's where the whole thing falls apart. It turns out that I'm going to say almost none defensively right now because somebody's going to raise their hand. We actually do that. But almost none of the threat intelligence platforms actually provide you a way to give feedback to whomever posted, right? So if I go in and I have the best of intentions, I'm not maliciously trying to mess things up. And, oh my God, this 8.8.8.8 is super evil. I have a lot of machines. It's totally it's a DNS exfiltration point. How many machines are talking DNS with it, right? And I post it, you know, to the sharing community. Nobody says a thing. It goes unnoticed. I mean, and I don't know if it's because people are not consuming. It's because, oh, I already have that filter, so I don't care, right? So it becomes very hostile, right? I mean, maybe people are, oh, I don't want to bother the guy. I don't know what it is. But people don't give feedback. And this is one of the biggest problems we have. It's specifically when we talk about the, how are we doing? Oh, we're fine. I think. How we do the whole bar. You must be at this stall to share. You must be this stall to be a part of the sharing community. You know, generating IOCs can be hard, but giving feedback is not that hard, right? I think everyone who has any sort of monitoring thing which is like more than, oh, there's just one security guy and he does that for fun when he doesn't want to go home, right? You can look at something like that and just give some feedback. Oh, I didn't like this, or I think this is wrong, or you know what? I actually saw this, right? But it's dismal, right? And again, I was looking at, so I was actively trying to, like, what they say, I was looking with kind eyes. And I was like, oh, maybe there's an updated timestamp. Let's assume if there's an updated timestamp, it's the same indicator, but then the first entered and then last updated, someone went there and gave feedback. So I'm counting that's feedback. Or someone, you published the IOC, and then on maybe X amount of days, someone published that same IOC again with a different thing. I'm going to count that as feedback, right? Because the wiring is not there. The controls are not there to do the feedback. So maybe people are being creative. Still, only I can even read it from here, 0.0013. That's awful. That had any sort of feedback. Otherwise, you have just those indicators there swimming, and they're there like, oh, I'm super cool. I'm an indicator, right? I'm one of several million we have. And nobody knows if they're good or not, right? And having this feedback process would theoretically, again, increase the trust on the quality of the data, on the members themselves. And this is one of the main things that I think the automated sharing, if we can call it like that, hasn't cracked, because this is natural when you go about the analyst-centric world, because they're talking to each other on email lists. So somebody sends, oh, I've just seen this come by, and the other one, yeah, I was investigating this. Here's what I've been able to extract, right? And people just help each other and like, oh, I saw this other email from the same campaign. And then you, as a trained human analyst, right? And, you know, good luck hiring those people. You can see the story playing out on the email. You can reason through it, and you can input it on whatever system you have, right? But we gotta do better than that. We gotta do faster than that. We can't be like reading emails all the time, right? So this is really an open question, right? I'm not claiming that I have the solution here, right? I probably would be in my yacht right now if I had the solution. But this is a question that we must ask ourselves, and we must try, again, driving this thing forward. Which, again, ties into the trust metric, right? Which is, again, what we're talking about. Let's share for everyone, right? But what about the people who we trust, right? So it turns out that maybe 80% is shared privately, right? If you look at the data there, and I wasn't I didn't see any of the data, but it was like, okay, tell me how many things are going on your open community, or it's TLP white, or whatever you want to call it. So everybody, I just signed up to the system, right? What can I see without knowing anyone? And you look at the amounts that people were either almost direct messaging themselves, or they create just teeny tiny private groups where it's just the three of us because we are like buddies and we drink beer all the time, and we're going to share this information here. It was massive. It was massive. But again, it was not weird. If you think again about the social network construct, right? And this is how, I mean, probably a lot of you guys use Slack. If you own a channel, they send you some statistics every week or so, right? This is how much people have been talking. You should stop slacking off work, because that's what the name is for. You should actually do work and stop like work stop being on the chat room. And you see like 76% of whatever was said, and this is maybe a year old place that I usually spend some time. No, I actually do serious work at. 76% was the direct messaging or private groups or things like that. Maybe the environment helped put these people together, right? So maybe they used it as a tool in order to share amongst themselves. I mean, they used the machinery. But again, this is not the pervasive sharing that we think we want to build, or that we're claiming that we're building on all those things, right? So again, this is important to understand what the limitations are, right? It's still humans who are going to make the decision if this is going to be sent out or not. The good news, at least, is that the data quality was a little bit better on the private stuff. And I mean that very flimsy, right? I'm actually exchanging hashes for IP addresses. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the David Bianco's Pyramid of Pain. He has a whole talk about a whole stuff. He talks about hunting and about the idea of the pain is that how much pain you cause your adversary when you figure out different parts of their infrastructure. So hashes are worthless because you just run the packer again and it's a completely different thing. The IP addresses is a little bit step up, right? Because actually, you know, he had to get that IP address on a bulletproof provider. He's going to have to call the guy and get another one. So it's a little bit, so we're exchanging hashes for IP addresses, which I think it's good, which ties again to the maybe higher quality things are happening on the back channels than what we actually see out there, right? So anyway, don't feel bad about the 80%. There's a lot of instances where you have to do the sharing privately, right? But we just have to realize that this is what we're up against. This is the culture we're up against. It's not a culture of sharing with everyone. It's not a culture of let's help the community. It's a culture of, yeah, we're a group here. We kind of trust each other. Let's just pass some things onto the table, right? So if the good data is not getting there, how can we reconcile, right? So anyway, final stretch, guys. Here's my take, right? And the things we should be thinking about if we really want to improve this and really like make me wrong and make that guy on the internet right, that threat intelligence sharing is going to solve all of this, right? So I think it comes down to two things. One is the trust, right? How can you increase trust? How can you make trust more? And again, automatic is a terrible word for it, but how can you make it maybe more transitive? Maybe, you know, you can make, again, the actual amount of trust points you have to have against someone, you know, it's actually a little bit lower, right? And also the technical barrier. The technical barrier is a real thing, right? So, and these are the two main things that are keeping people from sharing. Right? I either don't know how to generate something to share, or my legal is going to kill me if I put it there. So when you think about the trust thing, right? I think there are interesting experiments to be done with anonymity and reputation, right? And again, if I submit something anonymously, you're never going to trust. Who's this guy? I mean, why should I get this IP address? You know, it's probably, he doesn't know what he's doing, right? But then, if whatever community you're at, there's a reputation system on, right? I don't know who this guy is, but everyone here has been looking what he has been doing, and so far, he hasn't really fucked up. So, maybe we should give him extend the benefit of the doubt, right? Maybe I should start ingesting his data, right? And so reputation systems with anonymity is kind of an understood animal, right? I think Stack Overflow does an amazing job, right? I mean, the people who are moderators there, they're usually good in curating the good stuff and the bad stuff, right? I think Reddit and Hacker News are the cesspools of humanity, but as far as their reputation system, they are pretty good on just letting get through whatever twisted things they believe is reality. So it's working, right? This is not about an objective truth if I agree with them or not. It's working. The model is working. They only see what they want to see, right? So maybe, right, we can take this idea. This is an idea that we can play with, right, as we're trying to put together these anonymous sharing communities. So Alien Vote got the memo, right? I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with OTX. It's a system that they released a few months ago. Again, time is super weird here at this place. And actually, so I signed up as Needle, right? And, well, this could be anyone. I mean, there was no like, oh, confirm your email here, so that's really you. Anyone could have come in and claimed it was Needle or it was me or anything like that. There's no real tight control, right? But then, as I started posting things that made sense, people started to upvote me. People started to follow me. People started to subscribe to the things I was posting, right? And this became a measure of my reputation, of this account's reputation into the system, right? So everyone else, and now when someone onboards, right? And this is UX, right? This is like engagement stuff. When people onboard, when they get in, they see, oh, these are the top 5 contributors. Maybe these are the people you want to follow. Maybe what they're sharing is good for you. Maybe what they're sharing is the stuff you're looking for. Start with these, right? It can work, right? And there's a whole flip side of that, which is the curation argument, right? And this is much, much more common on our environment as well right now, which is I actually have a centralized curation system. So I am the owner of a threat intelligence community of some sort, and I will do the curation as the owner of that. And I mean, you got to be able to justify some value add, right? It's just a fucking CRM on the internet, so you might as well do some curation, right? So there's some interesting experiments on that, right? I specifically like the way the FSISAC does it, right? Which is they actually have an anonymous tip box. Anyone can send an email there and say, this is happening, right? And within reason, right, I assume that it's not super used and it's kind of limited to whomever is a member. They don't know who the member is, but they independently validate whatever the IOC was good or bad, the information was good or bad. And then they post it to the community like, this was an anonymous submission. Our team at FSISAC did the vetting, and this is good info. So the info got to everyone who needed, right? And whomever it happened to that wanted to become anonymous, stay that way. Not even if FSISAC knows who they are. I mean, they can probably figure out if you didn't do the cleansing of the data right. I mean, there's all sorts of details. I mean, if you want to do this, please don't fuck it up. But it works. There are examples of these things working, right? But this is very human intensive as well, right? So FSISAC, I mean, you pay good money for FSISAC for them to do this for you, right? So anyway, just wrapping up. I think there's an argument here for the technical barrier, right? I completely understand that not everyone will be able to produce and share IOCs, but feedback is super important, and it's easier. If you have a shoestring monitoring team, you can give feedback. And you can even leave a nasty note. You wasted 30 minutes of my analyst time with this crap, right? You can try to be more constructive, of course, but especially when you're driven by that anger because someone actually wasted your analyst time, why just not tell the community like, yeah, maybe this is a false positive, so maybe other analysts' time isn't wasted, right? This is not hard. I mean, maybe the tools are not there yet. People haven't actually provided a good UX for you to do it, right? OTX really, between me putting this talk together and today, they actually have an interesting Wikipedia-like thing now, which is if you see someone posted something, you can actually suggest an edit, and you can add IOCs, you can remove IOCs, you can add another comment, and it goes to the original poster, and the original poster reviews it and approves it or not. That's a smart way to give feedback, right? You're continuing the conversation, you're being engaged. So, and finally, one thing that it's not really talked about, and I appreciate it's super hard to do this right, is telemetry. Everybody's on the internet, sadly, right? Doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter how good your monitoring team is, it doesn't matter your understanding of threat intelligence or not. You are on the internet, you have a footprint, you have telemetry, right? And sometimes the question that people want to answer in threat intel is as simple as, is this targeted only for me, or are other people seeing this as well, right? And that makes a huge difference on how much resources you're going to put in, right? And how much freaked out you're going to be because the pandas are coming out for you or something. So telemetry, I believe, is really key for us to really unlocking the potential of threat intelligence, right? So NITO is not a threat intelligence sharing community, but these are the tenets of the kinds of data that we use in our autonomous hunting platform, right? And all of them contribute a little bit for us to be able to, hey, Mr. Customer, you know all this data you gave me? This is probably the story that you're looking for. These are probably the important things, right? And this is, again, this is exactly what the analyst would be doing. He would try to figure out, understanding if the IOC is good or bad. He's going to be comparing it to the telemetry, seeing if it's relevant or not, right? I'm not really sure how this telemetry sharing works. Everybody's going to freak out. But have you guys ever heard of D-Shield from SANS? This is exactly what D-Shield is. I mean, it's just inbound firewall logs. I mean, you can it's a Norse by any other name, right? But and I'm not dissing the data. I'm not dissing SANS for sure, right? They do an amazing work, but this is good telemetry. People use those lists. They understand that, okay, I'm not sure how representative the sample is. It's probably a lot of US folks, but at least I know what's going on in the US more or less. At least I can know if I'm the only one being scanned by this guy. It's super helpful. Anyway, sharing is hard. Okay, but that doesn't mean you should be discouraged, right? You should care. You should try to share. But the main reason why we're failing, my take is because we're just trying to lift a human-centric activity and let's just build a computer system that will handle that, and that's it. We're done. I built the system, and I can just walk away now. There is a lot of translation here that we haven't figured out. What does it mean to have the guarantees, to have the trust, to have the quality that I have in these human-centric environments in a way where we can share faster, right? We need to share faster. We need more and more, and I'm not going to go into this whole, sky's falling, bunch of malware, but you guys know it's all true, right? You are living in the trenches. You know it's all true, right? And having this data at hand quicker, it certainly would make our jobs a teeny tiny easier if we were able to do the data, if we know how to use the data, right? So don't buy feeds, just join a threat group. I'm kidding. But use it as collateral. I mean, think about it, right? This might be the best thing for you. Usually, especially the industry-focused ones, right? They're not about the feed at all. They're about, they will give you IOCs, they will give you indicators to work with, but they will teach you. The community will hopefully support you a little bit, right? It's all people who have gone through the same challenges. And this has very little to do with the actual IOC data. And anyway, it's all terrible, it's all more data, and we still need to work through it. So, I mean, just wrapping up, right? I love data. So if you're a part of a sharing community or, we have threat intelligence feeds and all those, I'm always trying to collaborate with folks and do these analyses with them, right? And understand, and maybe helping them I mean, if they think there's some deficiency in the feed, help them get it better. We can all discuss. I mean, I love the more data we have available, the better job we're all going to do. So I'm all for we having more data and more quality of data, right? And that's pretty much it. I guess we open for questions. I think there was a question in the back. I hope the guy hasn't forgotten. Yay! Hi.
When I was thinking about the matrix that showed the similarity of the threat feeds, I was just wondering, how do they define a threat? What do they include in their set?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So the question was, when I was showing the overlap matrix, and I was talking about, oh, this is the threat intelligence overlap. What did I mean? What did they consider to be threats, right? So that specifically were IP addresses and domain names, IOCs, right? So that was the data that I was extracting from their feeds, and I was comparing against each other. So if an IP address only showed once, it means there were no overlap. If it showed twice, there was.
So that's the what, but is there some kind of agreement about what gets into it, like how it gets included in the feed? So person A and person B agree on what a threat is?
So the question was if there's any process to agree what a threat is. Yeah.
So, but the different feeds have very different ideas of what a threat is, so that the content of the threat feed is quite different.
So I invite you to go to a threat intelligence panel and ask them, so to you, what is threat intelligence, right? Because you're going to get, from a panel of 4 people, you're going to get 5 different answers. No, there's absolutely no standard. Everybody will call anything whatever they want. So it's like, what is threat intelligence? Whatever you want to buy, Mr. Customer. That's pretty much the answer you get across the board. So no, there is no commonly defined. And again, a lot of people will, okay, so let's try to take this a different way, a little bit less skeptical. People usually define threat intelligence in tactical, operational, and strategical, right? So the tactical stuff will usually be, so there's actually a friend of mine who breaks down the tactical into technological, and she's trying to like do the whole, oh, this is all the IOCs moving back and forth automatically. Since I don't believe that this is a reality yet, for real, I like to keep the tactical tight, just the tactical. And the tactical is this thing that you will put on your IDS, you will put on your, you actually have something tactical to do with it. The operational is more like, oh, I know that pandas like snow, so I gotta make sure to have a lot of like snow melting equipment in my office because their techniques involve snow and things like that, right? And so it helps you think on their overall strategies and how they get into a company. And the strategical one is, oh my God, what I'm building right now in my company is like super valuable for country X. So they're totally going to try to go for me. I'm not exactly sure which one of their actors is going to come for me, but someone will. So I have to be prepared for that. I hope I answered. But this is like, yeah. It's a shit show. I'm sorry. I'm not the one who's going to solve that problem. But some people try to think it like this, right? And of course, whatever they sell is the best one, right? So that I can tell you for sure. Okay, are we done? We're done. Thanks a lot, guys.